my mom was escaping the heat of the central Illinois podunk town where she was teaching English. And
man, you went straight into the weeds. I love it. We're going to do this. We're going to do this.
My point is, I was born to be CH. Thank you. I'm going to pull it back.
I have all these questions about the way we use land in Boulder and why it is the way it is. And why can't we do it in a way that makes more sense as we, go into the third decade of the 21st century here? Why can't we kind of reimagine how to use land in a way that's better for a lot more people?
It's beautiful to share. It's a lot of fun. And I've had a lot of fun in this town. I love the people in this town. We disagree about a bunch of stuff and we can work together and make it even better. And there you go.
Welcome to our first introductory episode of the Sharing Boulder podcast, in which we explore issues related to land use and housing in Boulder, Colorado. My name is Philip Ogren, and in this episode, my co-host David Adamson and I have a conversation about our new podcast. We make no promises that we will never again wander from subject to subject as we free associate and pontificate about whatever pops into our brilliant minds, like the way we do in this episode. But this will probably be the only episode where we deliberately try to cover as much ground as possible as we give you a whirlwind tour of what our podcast is all about. We hope you find our conversation entertaining and thought-provoking, and we hope you will join us in our mission to make Boulder more inclusive. Welcome to Sharing Boulder. Hello, and welcome to the Sharing Boulder podcast. I'm Philip Ogren.
I'm David Adamson.
Welcome. We finally hit the record button. We've been talking about doing a podcast for a while now. We have so many interesting conversations about housing and land use in Boulder, and I'm really excited to kick this off with our first episode.
Me too.
This will be great. So David, let's start off by just introducing ourselves a little bit. What's your history in Boulder, and why are we doing this?
I've always just insisted on living Boulder from the beginning of being born here. And, my mom and dad met at CU, and my dad was a combat veteran and my mom was escaping the humid central Illinois podunk town where she was teaching. And, I didn't grow up here though. And then I wanted to come back. And after college, I came back after going to high school in Denver and living around the world a little bit more. And began a journey to, own a house here and be part of this town that I love running in the hills, and I love biking all around, and I love the people. And it just was, a place to help create a society that matches the scenery. That's really what I've been about. Wallace Stegner's famous quote that, the West is the native home of hope. And Boulder just inspires me, and I just love the folks here. And, of late, as I finally was able to buy a house and help wanting to develop co-housing and develop models of housing here that we'll get into some more, I really felt like we're going in a difficult direction that isn't supporting that kind of sharing Boulder. Bob Yates, the city council person, has a funny story about how everyone who ever came to Boulder, their first day here was the best day, and it's just gone downhill since then. And, in our podcast, we both feel so hopeful and inspired by this town. So I have felt the same way. And so my history is really just about loving this place and wanting to make it better. And let's go over to you.
Yeah, well, I hope a theme that comes through in this podcast is how much we love Boulder. So I live here in the city and have been here since 2007, and it's just a really special place to me. I when I came to town, I was a graduate student at the University of Colorado and moved to the family housing, the graduate student family housing at 30th and Colorado, Smiley Court. And what a wonderful place to start my residency here in Boulder. It's really nicely centrally located. It had a lot of it really welcomed. It was a very welcoming place. They had a lot of community gathering places, and people knew each other, and it was very convenient. You could live there without a car. And actually, most of the time I've been in Boulder, I've used my car very little. And in fact, at the moment, I don't have a car for the last 5 years or so. And yeah, so I just really love living here. But I got interested in these questions around housing and land use. For I guess initially just sort of like thinking through what makes these housing prices so high. And there's kind of simple economic explanations for it, but it's sort of it's actually not quite as straightforward as you would expect it to be, the answer. So that's
Darn right.
that's one subject I'd like to explore. I think a big part of this podcast is just educating ourselves and educating others about why is the city the way it is, and why is it so expensive? How come it's so exclusive? What could we do to make it more welcoming, and so that we could share it with more people? So hopefully that our name, Sharing Boulder, really conveys the fact that we want it to be an inclusive place. We think Boulder could do much better in terms of allowing people to come, and people of different economic backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, to come here and find a home, and find it to be welcoming. And you don't just, you don't have to be a tech titan, an entrepreneur, or a lawyer, a doctor, just to get a foothold here. That you could be a service worker, or a teacher, or a police officer, or whatever, and feel like you could live here comfortably, and be welcome to live here.
Well, absolutely. And I think we are great, complementary spokespeople that have, different perspectives on what has happened in Boulder and what is happening in Boulder. You and I I was born here 63 years ago. You came here in 2007. So, 14 years ago. I live more, closer to downtown in a old multifamily street that has some single family on it. You live in a lower density single family development that was built especially in the 70s, probably, in South Boulder. And so I think that helps us, get a little purchase on what's going on here, the trend. And when we see trends that aren't positive, it doesn't mean we don't love Boulder.
Yeah.
It means that we can change the trend. And I think a big part of what's going on with Sharing Boulder is we feel it's so exemplary and has a lot of lessons for the whole country. And, but it is especially about Boulder. But I think we will develop some program that is more broadly useful, because I think it really is, we're at a tipping point between where we can go with Western civilization. And of course, Gandhi said, well, that would be a good idea. They should try it. But, where Western civilization could go, and we're at such an inflection point. So it's really exciting to talk with you about this kind of thing, Philip.
Yeah, so I think your emphasis on the fact that we're focusing on Boulder is important. Obviously, the problems that Boulder has are not unique to Boulder, but we're speaking directly to Boulder in the sense that, like, we know this city really well. Like for me, I feel like I'm a local expert, right? I know the bike paths really well. I know the bus schedules. I know where to eat and drink. And, I just, and then I know a lot of people in the city, right? And so I want to communicate to people in Boulder. I hope that people around the world will find our podcast and get some value out of it. And they can take what's relevant to them and apply it. But really, I sort of want to you know, um, you know, I think people in Boulder sometimes they think about it's a very liberal, progressive city, right? Full of people who are forward thinkers and creative thinkers. And sometimes when we read about housing issues and diversity issues, it's all kind of abstract, and it's sort of like, yeah, we should elect national leaders who address all those problems. And I would be like, hey, there's a lot we can do right here in this city ourselves to make this much more diverse and much more welcoming, and tackle climate change and tackle diversity issues. And so I don't know. I just I want to make it less abstract and really focus in on what can we do here in this city to make it better.
Well, darn right. And I think that by tackling that head on here, which is really about the anti-democratic, the way we've treated land use, the betrayal of the American dream, and the betrayal of Boulder values that has occurred in an accelerating way in the last 20 or 30 years here in Boulder. We really get at the heart of both the environmental crisis worldwide and the social justice, economic inequality crisis worldwide. I mean, land, it's a big argument in economics, of course, and we'll get into that. But land is at the heart of wealth, at the heart of value, at the heart of community. So I think we've got a great place to focus on, and I don't think that we are missing our opportunity to talk about things relevant outside Boulder to focus on Boulder.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So David, I want to hear, give me a quick introduction about Goose Creek Community Land Trust.
So Goose Creek Community Land Trust is a housing advocate and a housing developer, nonprofit organization that's been around for about 5 years. Our first project was to make sure that this big hospital complex right near the center of town, Boulder Community Hospital, 9-acre site that they were selling, we wanted to make sure that it was at least purchased by the city. We didn't have time to purchase it ourselves. It was going to be a $40-60 million deal. And we wanted to, we mobilized to help support the idea of the city purchasing it and developing it, in our mind, especially for housing and for a lot of mixed income housing. And, city maybe thought a little bit more about offices there. But that was our first project. And we've been working to a degree afterwards to try to get some housing built there. It's been very difficult. It kind of brings up the kind of two different views we have, that we're a progressive place, but actually we're not developing the housing that the working people need here. So that was a big project. And then next to that, we've been working to create an infill co-housing project. How can we take these lower density housing that we have in most of the city? How can we change the model there and provide a durable place for future generations and mixed income folks? So those are we're trying to create that model elsewhere, but we're especially focused in this upper part of the Goose Creek watershed. So we're trying to connect people back to the land by focusing on a watershed approach, which a lot of people in this town are familiar with because so many of our cool bike paths go along these tributary creeks, and people are aware of where in this water scarce region the creeks are, and that is so much of the nice opportunity we have to connect with nature here. So anyway, that's Goose Creek Community Land Trust. It's a very exciting project.
Yeah, so that project informs a lot of the the local work that you've been doing in Boulder and in your neighborhood. We actually have an episode coming up where I interview you on North Street, and we look at several properties on that in that neighborhood. So that's coming soon. There's kind of an endless number of possibilities we've talked about for this podcast. We've already interviewed a couple leaders in Boulder. Aaron Brockett, a city councilman, will be in one of our first episodes. That was a really interesting interview. We also interviewed Dave Ensign, who is the senior member of the Boulder Planning Board. And that was also super interesting. So there's going to be an aspect of this where we, meet different people and we learn about what's the planning board. That's like a whole episode right there. Is like what is the planning board? How do they affect land use and housing? And well,
right on. And I think there's a subtext to our idea about sharing Boulder, about democratizing land use and helping, we hope as a result of our podcast that more people can get involved and express their ideas about how we should use the land. I know it's challenging to a lot of people. They maybe don't know that much about how land use is governed in this town. And, we've been, it's been a very challenging time, especially lately. And it's been a democratizing element with COVID, making all the meetings be virtual. I think there's an argument that it's opened up the opportunity to participate in land use, or at least to learn about it. So I know that's a big hope for both of us about the podcast, is that we can help people participate skillfully to express their ideas about how we can make a better town.
Yeah, well, I think the first thing that slaps people in the face when they try to come to Boulder and start a career here or live here is how expensive housing is, and people, it's complicated. Why is housing expensive? And sometimes I feel like people come up with simplistic solutions like, well, housing ought to be less expensive, and well, let's just make it less expensive, right? And well, how do you do that without major disruptive change? And one of the thought exercises I do when I'm walking through this city is thinking about, well, if like I was in charge, what would I build here, right? I mean, I certainly wouldn't build any more single family homes on large lots, right? Because there's no more space. We have cordoned off open space surrounding the city. So one of the things that's special about Boulder, right, is that we have really been intentional about the way we've collectively reserved open space for future generations. We're not going to sprawl out in every direction, down to El Dorado Springs or up to Loveland or Lyons. We're going to keep the land preserved in its pristine beauty for generations. And that's great. I'm glad we're doing that. But I think it's also ironic that we kind of equally, the way we hate sprawl, we sort of equally hate density. And to me, that's sort of like those two are in tension with each other, to say, well, this land that we've already developed, we're just going to let it be suburban sprawl for the decades going forward without really addressing like what's the best use of the land.
Well, absolutely. And we want to give thanks for the beautiful activists who, from 67 really onwards, promoted a beautiful program of basically preserving a third of the Boulder County landmass. There's about 450,000 acres in Boulder County, and the Forest Service owns about a third of that, so on the western side of Boulder County. And then the city and the county collectively control about another third, about 140,000 acres, either in fee, they own the land, or they have a conservation easement on the land that restricts development. There's some agricultural development allowed there, but it's especially for habitat protection and for recreation. Yeah. So that's a beautiful thing. And it cost about $1 billion to do that over those years, significant investment that, just to bring up the issue about why is land so expensive, why is housing so expensive in Boulder, we decided that it wouldn't be the market. Markets allocate scarce goods and resources to the highest bidder. And we have thought, and there's a whole history of this that I'm sure we'll get into, but we thought, well, that's an efficient way to allocate resources. But allocating resources to the highest bidder, is that really what you want to do with healthcare or food or, so many things that we as human beings, clean air, clean water? Do you allocate those elements of the commons, maybe allocating fur coats or sushi or whatever to the highest bidder? Maybe that's that's food, but anyway, allocating housing to the highest bidder, maybe that's not a great idea. So, we're going to talk about that and challenge that. We're not going to try to, on this first episode, completely solve the problem, but I think it has a lot to do with being flexible about our economic ideas. And I feel like everyone can benefit. And just to get to another aspect of our show, that being flexible, having an interchange of ideas, listening to people who think something different, that's part of what makes Boulder great. That's part of what'll help us get to solutions. And so anyway, I just want to let people know that we're going to have a diverse ideas on the show. We're going to engage with them respectfully as much as we can. And I'm just super excited about that.
Yeah, well, I'm really glad you acknowledged the hard work that our the generation that came before us did to set aside open space. It's not something every city has done, right? It was a hard fought battle that had long odds, and what an amazing success that we have all this open space to share with our kids and our neighbors, right? So, but there's an aspect to it where it's like half of the solution, where we've curbed the sprawl, but in one respect, in the sense that in the city of Boulder, it's clear that we're not sprawling out further. We're not just going to march on with our bulldozers.
Well, in a way, right? But we've exported it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We've encouraged it elsewhere.
We've exacerbated it elsewhere, and so this buffer, this open space buffer we have around in our city, has almost actually just exacerbated it in the sense that people who can't afford to live here have to drive further through the open space to get here, and so that's kind of one of the ironies of having half of a solution where we have managed to curb the amount of sprawl coming from the center of Boulder, but we haven't addressed the housing shortages that have arisen. We have a booming economy here. We have a world-class research university, and we have a healthy tech industry and the food industry and tourism and all these things that make it possible for people to come and have careers here. But then the housing has been stagnant for the last 50 years. And so, I mean, that's an overarching theme for why housing is expensive, because the supply has been constrained. And so there's lots of directions to go from here. But
I think that's really good. If you go ahead.
Yeah, but one thing I would like to do is just make a statement about my own personal belief about how we should address this. So I think since I've been here, the local politics have kind of been dominated by this conversation of, are we going to have zero population growth versus like incremental population growth? And it's like these two sides are at bitter war with each other. And to me, it feels like a false dichotomy, because we have such low density in Boulder, about 4,000 people per square mile, which is high by Colorado standards, by the way, but pretty low by world-class city standards. You think about a city like Copenhagen, which we should have a little bell that rings every time we say the word Copenhagen, because it comes up every time we talk. But we could double our population triple or quadruple it, and maybe this is one place where we differ significantly, I'm not sure. But if we tripled our population from 100,000 to 300,000 people, we wouldn't have Manhattan style density. It wouldn't, we don't have to become like a super dense city. It would be more like Copenhagen style density. And that would be lovely. People love going to Copenhagen and spending, and they think, oh, I would love to live. Well, what a nice, lovely city this is, right? And, if you think about what it would mean for Boulder to add 200,000 people, the kind of inclusion, what kind of impact could we have on the diversity of the demographics? What kind of economic diversity would we have? How much better would the city be? Like our neighborhoods, we have some really nice neighborhoods in Boulder, the pedestrian district downtown, the university campus, Chautauqua Park. There's some really lovely places in Boulder, but most of it is dominated by suburban sprawl type development. And it's boring, and
well, it's just getting super, super, super expensive.
And super expensive, yeah.
And I think it's so great that you bring up the idea of population increase, and we started off with open space, and I think we're just going to invite people listening, and we really love to have people who are like excited about density and people who are oh my God, that's
horrible.
That's horrible.
Not in my backyard, please.
Not in my backyard, and yes, my backyard. But to break it down a little bit and calm down a little bit and understand, the density is neither good nor bad. Height limits are not necessarily good or bad, but it's so much about how it's done. And of course, you and I are big promoters of the idea of, if we go to a much less auto-centered form of development, then we're emphasizing the people. We're emphasizing the interaction,
human scale,
the cafe culture, and how do we increase the sort of ability for people to get together and interact and share ideas, and that's where value comes from, and beauty. And we love the ideas of the happy city, where Charles Montgomery is talking about that idea of increasing interaction and the sort of casual friendships that helps us, actually improves our health, improves our sense of security, improves our ability to thrive. We are in interaction with more people. We don't have to constantly be in interaction with more people. We've done it well, so people have their private spaces, but then the public realm is richer, more vital, more available, healthy, etc. So it's in how you do it, and that's a big part of what we're doing in this podcast, is sharing ideas about how you do share spaces, and help people go beyond this, like, we can't have density, or we have to have density, to work together to create that compact form in a way that everyone enjoys. Which, I mean, if we're going to just be divulge how we really feel that can be done. It has been done. For millennia, human civilizations have created beautiful ways of sharing space that work well and have diverse elements. So I'm of course, that's the nub of our discussion, and I hope people stay with us.
Well, yeah. So the issue of our car-centric lifestyle and structures, the amount of space that we give over to cars and their storage and conveyance, it's absurd. And if I could hold up a book right now, it would be this book called Suburban Nation, which is a book I read 10, 15 years ago that really, really changed my perspective on all these things. It really made me angry, because now I couldn't just enjoy my suburban sprawl anymore. I was angry about it. But one of the points he makes in that book is that, a lot of the most attractive and wonderful neighborhoods that are treasures in North America aren't even legal to build anymore. And, the neighborhood I live in is not a place you would come to and think, oh, what a special place. It's just more suburban sprawl. And it's like that because we've centered our economic lives and our entire social lives around going in everywhere in cars. And that's a problem for lots of reasons. But I mean, one of the most obvious is that we're facing a climate crisis. And I'm not sure how we're going to get out of our cars if we live in structures that are completely handed over to, thinking about cars as first-class citizens. I would love to live in a neighborhood where pedestrians were first-class citizens and bikers were a close second, and cars were like a distant third. It's inconvenient, and it's socially, perhaps less acceptable, perhaps. Anyways, I feel like if we're going to tackle the climate change, the climate change crisis, we're going to have to figure out how to have human scaled walkable neighborhoods that, are lovely.
Well, I want to get back to that idea of being flexible, whether it's height or low density or my car. I mean, we can get really invested in a certain way of doing things. And, that's the big picture on that, of course, that's idolatry. That's the idea of the golden calf. You get more interested in a certain way of doing things rather than the spirit or the value. And so again, we're trying to promote openness, both in people like ourselves, but asking everyone to look at, well, what is really makes us happy? What is really good for us? And I think the climate crisis is bringing right up that, the commons, the climate stability, that's an element of the commons. Our species has thrived amidst this climate stability. And, another aspect of it is health. About 300,000 people die prematurely in the United States because of fossil fuel burning, respiratory and heart problems. And 8 million, it's estimated, in the world die prematurely because of our fossil fuel burning. And we can be healthier. We can live longer by changing that. Now, the Biden administration's idea is we're going to have a lot more electric cars, and we're going to sort of take. I'm not saying this is exclusively their idea. I know Pete Buttigieg as the transportation secretary, wants to encourage, not non-car transportation, but the idea of more compact form for neighborhoods like you're talking about, that has been identified as the #1 climate strategy. So there you have a form that both supports our health, supports the climate solutions, which is also about our health. And so anyway, I'm just promoting that idea of multi-solution, multi-problem solutions that we should be open to as we're thinking about Boulder.
Yeah, that cuts close to home for me because I live close to foothills on the east and US 36 on the south, and I worry about the air quality that I'm breathing. I have people who drive through the neighborhood and sometimes will just literally sit there idling their cars while I'm
all the time. We see that. And I just want to let our listeners know is that my brother-in-law is a really accomplished pulmonologist and a research physician in Canada, and he sent me a study recently that just showed you really don't want to be exercising or even be within 100 meters, within 100 yards of a big road. I mean, there's a much higher level of pollution right there near it. And so, of course, we have our nice bike path next to US 36, next to the turnpike, which I just wouldn't use during high traffic hours. I wouldn't do that. And anyway, that's that, when you start to know things like that, you start to think of alternatives, which we have some great ones in Boulder with a lot of the bike paths here. And I think our challenge is to do more of that. And instead of the idea of like, let's make cars and bikes and peds sort of in this harmonious, sharing the Boulder, our strategy is mostly around complete streets and, giving access to everyone on streets. I'd like us to explore a little bit more separating people and bikes and cars a lot more, and doing what they did in Copenhagen, which is they started really restricting the ability for cars to have equal access to everywhere. And the parking manager there for decades was just doing everything he could to restrict parking all the time. They were clamping down on parking, so that now in Copenhagen, where they have 65% of all trips done by bike, you ask people, why do you go by bike? And you think, oh, the Danes are really environmentally oriented. No, they say because it's faster.
Yeah.
95%. Michael Colville Anderson, the Copenhagen, the bike coordinator, did the survey, and they do it because it's faster.
Yeah, well, and Boulder is kind of funny that way, because I have a colleague who lives in my neighborhood who packs his kids into a minivan. He drives through the neighborhood to drop them off at a school. Then he drives downtown Boulder to park in a paid parking garage so that he can work downtown. And that's crazy to me, because with electric assist bicycles, you could do that trip faster and it would be more fun for the kids. I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but I feel like when you're in the car with your kids, it's sort of like you versus them. It's like it's like an antisocial activity, right? Where it's
they're
like,
on their screen and you're trying to talk to them.
And when you're on bikes with kids, it's like we're in this together, and it's a very pro-social. It's we're doing this. So
well, absolutely, and I just want to share one little anecdote about that. And we're both parents, and we both have brought up kids, and they're different ages, etc. But I came a lot down to your neighborhood, from Central Boulder down to South Boulder for their Waldorf-oriented elementary school in a big box bike, this Bachfiets bike that has a big basket in the front. Dutch innovation. And so my son Abe, who's a real thoughtful guy, and maybe we'll share some more stories about Abe in the future, but I got him on the road of being irreverent, and I just got a big blast of diesel one time, and he was in the front of the bike, and warning to all of our family members, I'm about to use a bad word, but I just said, oh, fucking diesel. And Abe said, yeah, man, fucking diesel. And so that was the beginning of a lot of unfortunate speaking in our family. But, we were united in that. We had a great time, and he started noticing, well, yeah, maybe this isn't that great for me, the way things are. And
I love that story. We actively encourage swearing in our family. So, but
we'll be judicious, I'm sure.
For sure. Yeah. To me, it's crazy to me that it seems like there's certain people driving around the city who seem like they're proud of the diesel they're inflicting on everybody, or the pollution that they're inflicting with their large vehicles on others. And you've brought this up many times, like, what about my right to bike through this city without breathing your pollution coming straight out of your tailpipe? That has serious health consequences to me, and I'd rather not have to just drive everywhere just to escape your pollution.
Well, right on. And I think it goes back to what we're trying to do with this podcast of thinking more deeply about what's really in your interest. And certain people identify with the big truck or the environmental organization they're part of, or their, what some aspect of their identity, which is maybe been promoted by, being a consumer rather than a person. And I just want to mention that, the 500,000 diesel truck owners who detuned their trucks to maybe enhance their performance a little bit now emit the equivalent of 8 million trucks. I mean, it's a big thing that has happened, and it's such a perverse thing, hurting their health and everyone's health. But it comes back a little bit to that idea of identifying with something that's really maybe not helping you. And I think just to make a weird segue, I think some of us advocates of housing and of environmentalism, in vilifying people like that, we don't do ourselves any favor there. We're not really helping. So I hope we in our podcast, help us all to look more deeply into what really serves us.
Yeah, well, thinking about bringing people in to our points of view, I think one of the best way to liberalize people is to move them into cities. And that's really well documented that people become more progressive and more community oriented when they live near other people. And our land use policies in Boulder have really excluded people, and people deride us because they're like, oh, they're just wealthy, out of touch, exclusive people, and they want us to vote like them. When I think about the depression, the cloud of depression that came over Boulder when we woke up to the news that Trump had won the popular election, or that had won the presidency.
Not the popular election.
No, he lost that, which is really remarkable. But I mean, there was palpable grieving that occurred in this city. And one of the things that I picked up in all the commentary was like, why won't they vote? Why won't they vote like us? Why won't they vote like us? And, the dichotomy that's implied by that question answers it. It's because they are over there. We don't let them in our city. They're not going to become liberals like us because we actually don't make space for them here. So I think one of the best ways we can really address a lot of our social political issues is to make great cities that are wonderful to live in, that are attractive and attracting people.
That's right, and different kinds of people. And I think that's been a point on which we agree, that our land use has in the United States, despite our values, has been dividing us by race and income, and that this is destructive of democracy when people don't know each other. And obviously the media landscape has also done this to allow people to in their own little silos, but separating people on the land and cars further separates them spatially so that it is hard to connect, it seems like an anti-democratic force. I mean, what do you think?
I was thinking ahead to what to something else. I don't know.
Well, you said it, but I think that's the glory of Boulder.
I absolutely agree. Yeah. So David, this has been a really interesting conversation. It's fun to just touch on all these different things that we've had long and extensive conversations about in recent memory. And I'm super excited that we're going to just explore all this stuff with all these different subjects with our audience in this podcast. I thought it might be a nice way to end this episode is just to kind of do a quick survey of all the things we'd like to talk about, like different episodes we might want to do. So like one example is I would love to interview the folks at Bedrooms Are for People who are working on occupancy reform by increasing the number of people that can live in the currently available housing. I think that's a fantastic effort that they're doing. What's one that you're interested in?
Well, I am so excited, as you know, because it's a focus of Goose Creek Community Land for us to talk about Wooners, or reinventing streets to make them safer and more available to different uses, rather than just being places for parking cars and creating the heat island effect with that asphalt heating up and making our town hotter. And how can we use it more for recreation, for gardening, for a way to get around without a car. so I'm excited to look at that. How do we reinvent our streets and promote a transportation that serves us better?
Yeah, I love that. There is so much asphalt in this city. It just drives me crazy. And this reminds me, what you just said reminds me of another theme I think we need to explore, and that is going through the city and just pointing out the way it exists right now and how we would like to see it. And a nice example is the Alpine Balsam property and the vision that has been put forth of what could be put there. And, what's keeping that from being a great transit friendly, walkable friendly neighborhood? It's just sitting there year after year now. And so I'm excited about doing some podcasts on site. So one of the ideas that we've talked about is going up and down Baseline to point out all the wasted space. There's so much wasted space. It's crazy making, and just discuss why can't we make better use of it.
And we have so many fantastic folks doing fantastic things in this town who, and in other towns, Danica Powell, with the Trestlewood strategy is just a fascinating figure, former planning board member. So she's an example of one of the change makers that I would like to interview soon.
Great. So yeah, I guess we've touched on a bunch of subjects today. That all sounds great. I'm super excited.
Well, me too. And we'll have a great listing of all these folks. Another show that I'm hoping we can get to soon is talking to some of the past planning directors of Boulder. We're both looking back at how we got to where we are today, and we're looking forward to where we can go. Where have other people gone? What can we learn? How can we be better advocates of change and work together to bring people together so we can share Boulder in a way that makes it an even, funner place to live, and not a divided place I think we can do a lot better in the quality of our discussion about making change, both in making it more democratic, and we hope in our podcast to helping to give people tools to do that in a more informed and skillful way.
Yeah, I think I'd like to think of us as breathing in some creative imagination into what could be, right? Like it's not all about like you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong. It's like there's these things that we could do to make life so much better, right? And I think that the creativity and the economic activity, when I think about what's the purpose of the economy, what it's very difficult. Like, how do I want to participate in the economy? I'm enriching, I'm making global capitalism more powerful by doing this or by doing that. But to me, like one of the most satisfying, important things we can do is build great cities, great places to live, so that we can have smaller carbon footprint, so that we can connect with our neighbors, so that all of those things.
Well, I think that points up to our exploring, because when you start to pull out the string of land use and why is it the way it is, you definitely get into political and economic systems, and it's going to be a fascinating exploration, and we're going to have great folks on to help us with that. And
David, what's another show that you're excited about?
Well, I want to talk to some of the people who left Boulder. There's some folks before us who have been working on this task of maybe helping the town go more in a direction that honors making a society to match the scenery, which Wallace Stegner talked about, the West being the native home of hope. And, it's a beautiful place, but are we maintaining this hotbed of innovation and that comes from bringing different people together? And so folks like the architect and the city council candidate Fennel Hoffman. I want to get him on the show. I want to get Zane Selvins, who is a planning board applicant, just a very deep thinker about all these issues of land use and political systems and economic systems, who's been living in Guatemala, I think, recently. Christina Gosnell, who was another housing advocate, both of them involved in the co-op movement here to reform our co-op ordinance, she left a few years ago as well to go to Philadelphia. So I think there's a rich history, there's a rich group of folks who have some important critiques to make about Boulder that we can learn from. So that's a show those are a show or a few shows that'd be fun to do.
Awesome. Well, yeah, we have, there's lots of social justice angles to explore too. We've been going to this Boulder County housing in Boulder County series, and there's been lots of wonderful speakers at that have really been educating. I feel like now is a really great time where people are becoming aware that like a lot of people have read this book, The Color of Law, and are becoming aware that even if we don't have racist hatred in our hearts, we're participating in structures that have racist outcomes and
beginnings, racist origins.
Or racist origins, for sure. I mean, this whole idea of zoning, and I want to tackle zoning as one major piece that just sort of needs to be fundamentally redone. And there's issues around that are adjacent to a zoning, like who should be owned, what are the models for owning land, like the community land trust idea. So there's like this you start unrolling all of the subjects, and we've got endless possibilities for different podcast episodes.
Be clear that we want to explore this from different angles. So I think we want to highlight some of the not apologists for NIMBYism, but we want to, I'd like to have folks like Kathleen Hancock on and who was fought for lower density development of alpine balsam. And of course, the longtime, former city council member and, civic activist Steve Pomerantz. Let's interview Steve Pomerantz about why we should maintain the sort of low population density town. Why that's best. I think it'll be really exciting to talk with people like that, and George or Jorge Booth, who was part of the alpine balsam resistance to more housing there, who's recently been appointed to the planning board, and I know has some strong economic views. Why do they think the way they think? I had a great chat with Kathleen Hancock one time, and she was super nice. She reached out to me and she said, well, I think you're trying to destroy this city, and and I'm trying to protect it, but I know that's not really what you want to do, so let's talk. So I don't think we changed each other's views at all. And I might have been a little too much of a zealot. And, but, I think we can have good conversations with folks like that.
I totally agree. I want to have dialogue with lots of different perspectives. I also want to feel free to have less patience for people who don't want to see anything change. Right. And it's like we've been sitting on these problems for decades, and our collective creative imagination isn't solving them very quickly. And I feel like we are at a tipping point where, like, do we really believe there's a climate crisis? Do we believe it or not? And are we
and does personal action matter? Are
we gonna get out of our cars, or are we gonna just keep doing what we're doing, just greener? And I think that's a lie we're telling ourselves, that we're just going to keep doing everything that we're doing, but we're just going to do it a little more efficiently, a little more greener, and everything's going to work out honky-dory.
That's right. And this is I think it's a big tipping point in a lot of ways. We have a new city manager, we have a new planning director, We have 2 new county commissioners. We're coming up on a big city council election with 5 seats are going to be open.
Oh yes, we need to have
November.
All the candidates on our show this summer. So
well, and you and I are both talking about different ways to go in a different direction, after that election in the city in particular. So we're definitely going to get into how things can be really different. I think that's what's great about the timing of our show. It is such a tipping point.
Yeah. Another subject that came up in my mind is thinking about this from a kind of a spiritual angle or a personal fulfillment angle, like what is it that makes our lives meaningful? And one of the themes that resonates for me with this show is minimalism and car light living. Obviously, I'm a big fan of car light living. I'd love to do a whole show just on that. But also, minimalism kind of more broadly as a path towards sort of shedding all these ideas we have about like just how big of a fortune do we need to accumulate until we finally feel secure in ourselves, and what does it mean to have security?
Security, just to go, my mom was a Shakespeare scholar, so at the beginning of Macbeth, the 3 witches are getting together talking about Macbeth, who's going to murder all of his rivals so he can be king, and they say, and ye all know security is mortal's chiefest enemy. So, I think that the car light, the idea that you brought up earlier on of, what makes us happy, that's the ideas that maybe weigh us down, like those awful NIMBYs, we'll work together on shedding some of those burdens.
Well, I'm glad you referenced Shakespeare just now. It makes me think of another broad theme that I'd like to explore, and that is just how art and music and we have so many creative people in this city, and we should have them on our show because we need creativity to make this all happen, and also the kind of emotional impact that's required to sort of change the direction. If we would like to convert, right? We would like to convert this city into something else, and we'd like to convert the people that are in it. And I think part of that, you could think of it as a spiritual conversion of sorts, but just making connection with people and changing people's emotions around these issues, I think is going to require artists and comedians. Obviously, I love comedy, and so I'm interested in having people who are funny on the show. And hopefully, we can really touch people by connecting, bringing people on the show who know how to connect and change minds.
Well, and hearts. And I know this is a hard thing to bring up at the end, but we talked about it being such a tipping point. And so we've had the shooting in Boulder recently, and I think it's broken a lot of our hearts for good reasons. And I don't know how this really works, but I hope that also contributes to our ability to learn how to live together beautifully and healthfully. And it's been a very tough thing for us all, I know, but I think so much beauty has emerged recently, out there at the site of the King Soopers shooting where 10 folks were murdered. And we don't know a lot about the shooter, but I think it is an issue that talks a lot about, our country and where we are right now and how we need to move forward, whether it's the climate or health related to breathing fossil fuel related pollution, or these mass shootings that we have in our country. I mean, we really need to move in a different direction. And
yeah, absolutely. So we are having this interview on April 3rd. So we're just under 2 weeks out from that shooting event. That was devastating to to all of us. And I know personally, I took it really hard. The week after that happened, I had difficulty working, and I just burst into tears a lot because I had spent the previous Saturday canvassing for a petition drive that we were doing outside of that store. So like fresh in my mind is just thinking about the kinds of people that were going in and out of that store, and the notion that some mentally ill gun owner can show up and snuff out 10 random people out of that sea of lovely folks that, and Boulder is filled with lovely people who are willing to stop and talk with me about my petition drive. Are you a voter in Boulder? Nobody was like, oh, fuck off. They show up and they say, yeah, tell me more. And some people are in a hurry, and that's fine. But yeah, it really cut close to home, because that store has been a center part of my life for a long time. I send my kids there with $10 of cash to go get lunch or candy or whatever on their bikes. So that's been a big part of our family, is sending kids out their first taste of independence to go and spend some money and have some time on their own with each other and on their bikes. And to have a psychopath like that come through and just destroy so much community trust in that one afternoon is devastating.
Well, I think it has a lot to do with the whole evolution of the human race. I think a lot of our intelligence has derived, and our brain development has derived from our social interactions and our need to understand when encountering other human beings, where they're going to be helpful or hurtful, or how is this going to go? And we've sort of been about answering that question, since then. How is this going to go? Or how are we going to work together? Are we going to be able to live together and work together? Are we going to cooperate? Are we going to collaborate? Or are we going to fight?
Or are we going to have this constant fantasy of like how we're going to be well armed and well supplied when the shit hits the fan? And I feel like, my personal philosophy is I am all in on this society. I want to make this society work. I think lots of people are going to really suffer if we just undo all of it and start over. So I want to improve. I want to start where we are and improve, right? And I don't want to sit around at the end of a county road with my gun supply and my food buckets and fantasize about how
machine gun.
Yeah, and fantasize about how I'm going to out survive my neighbors when everything goes south.
Well, I think that's really where we are as a civilization. Where are we going to go? How are we going to do it? Are we going to work together and overcome So here we go. That's our show. we're gonna bring as much love and light and openness and support for all of us humans as we can, and learn and go forward in a beautiful way.
Thank you to all of our listeners who endured our first episode. It's going to be a fun ride. I hope you'll listen and share and
give us ideas.
Please send feedback and comments, and thanks for bearing with us today. We're really excited about moving forward with these conversations.
And sharing Boulder.
Absolutely. Peace.
Thanks, Philip. Talk to you next time.
Yep.
This episode of Sharing Boulder was produced by David Adamson and Philip Ogren. Sound and video editing was done by Philip Ogren. The intro music was sampled from Oslodom by Gilberto Gil and is available for use under the Creative Commons Sampling Plus license.